meeting of Ignite CDA, Coeur d'Alene's Urban Renewal Agency. If we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remove any hats.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tony. And now it's time for public comment. Is anybody wishing to share some public comment with us? Please step forward, state your name and address. Seeing no one, how about I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the July 18th board meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the July 18th meeting.
Moved
Seconded.
and seconded. Any discussion, corrections, additions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next is the opening of the bids. We had do you want to run through all the process we went through to post for sale of these two properties?
Yeah, so the board deemed these two properties surplus, and we went through the sealed bid auction process where we advertised these properties for sale via a sealed bid process with the sealed bid materials located on our website and on the homepage. We've put that out there for several weeks, and the bids were due today at 3 p.m., and we received 3 bids for one property. So Chairman Hoskins will now open those.
We have these properties appraised, and then the board sets the minimum value, which is the appraisal price for these properties, so that's what the minimum bid has to be.
Well, actually, for the 301 Lakeside Avenue, the appraisal value was $650,000, and the board increased it to $750,000. But the 311 Lakeside was $220,000 is the appraised value.
Okay, ready? .311 Lakeside. From Daniel Clark, 226,000.
I think there might be an escalation.
311 Lakeside again. From John Swallow and Tyler Alvarado, 266,000. There is an escalation clause, bid tiebreaker in this one also. For 311 Lakeside, from GVD Partners, 221,000.
So based on the bids, it looks like there's an escalation clause in Dan Clark's bid where he would go up $500 more than the maximum bid of the next party, up to $326,000. So the next highest bid is $266,000. So I think we would accept Dan Clark's bid at an amount of $266,500.
266.
Was there an escalation clause in any of the other bids?
I thought
There-
the second one you said.
The second one, there's an escalation clause of $4,750, so they would only go up to,
That's a tiebreaker, though, that's not a, you read that. It doesn't say you get to just beat the next highest guy by $500.
So you'd go the 4,000 and then go 500 more than that.
initial bid is 266, but then they say there's a tiebreaker of 4750.
So is Dan Clark,
It wasn't a tie.
shouldn't be a tie.
Right.
She was
it's not.
40,000 less.
Right. But Dan Clark's has an escalation clause of 500 above the maximum bid. So I think the 266, 500 would be the right number. You wanna look at them, Tony?
I really thought all the bids would come in for 301. Parking lot.
I agree with you.
So you want to recap that one more time?
So the three bids came in, with the lowest one being from GVD Partners for 221,000. The second is from Dan Clark at 226,000, but with a escalation of up to 326,000, exceeding the next bid by $500, and then 266,000 from John Swallow and Tyler Alvarado.
And what's the escalation clause on that one?
So on that, it's written as a tiebreaker of $4,750.
Where was there an option on the form for an escalation clause? Because if not, why would we just bid the minimum and say we'll beat the highest bid by $10?
Yeah, it's a
I mean, we were doing what
tiebreaker.
was best interest of Ignite CDA, put our, best and final offer out there, because that's what the purpose of a closed bid is.
Otherwise, we would have done the same thing up to a certain number, beat it by $500 and just keep going.
We can't enter into this.
What?
You can't, you're not on a microphone,
You need
so
to come
then
up and
you need to
speak
come
in
up to
the
the
mic
microphone
up
up
here.
here if you're gonna, for comment. Please. And state your name and address, please.
John Swallow, 905 South Jarvis Road, Coeur d'Alene. So if you read the form right there, and actually Tyler Alvarado is my partner here, if you read the form, you bid, and then in case of a tie, there's then the amount that you can go over. It doesn't say you get to have an escalation clause if there's a tie, or you get to beat the next highest guy. Otherwise, you would just have an open bidding process right here, and that's what that process would be.
Well, the way that I read it is that you say what, in the event that there's a tie, that there's a maximum amount that you would go to, so your maximum
A tie on the bid, though, there wasn't a tie on the bid. We actually were the highest bid.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a tie.
So we ran into this issue with bids on North Park Drive lots, that bidders included escalation clauses in their bid. We didn't ask for it, and we didn't say you couldn't do it, so they did. So the board honored those on the past auction. So, I mean, it's a
But
competitive
we didn't,
strategy.
because it doesn't say you can do that. It only says in the event of a tie. It doesn't say escalation clause also in there.
Well,
It
you-
has like you bid, and then in the event of a tie.
Well,
It
you're-
doesn't
you're-
say you bid escalation clause in the event of a tie.
But your bid could include an escalation clause. There's nothing saying that you couldn't do that.
But you know, we all know, there's a lot of things that says, that doesn't say in there, but you can't do. I mean, we all know that. I mean, we're gonna have to get a legal opinion on this then, because it's the bids, and then in the case of a tie, there's the tiebreaker.
That's why we bid $46,000 over the appraised value, because that's our, what our offer was. And if
Otherwise, we
wanted to
would have
have a
said-
bidding war, we could just do an open, live auction.
Yeah, I mean, then you would have had a live
They
auction.
agreed to pay up to 326,000.
No, he didn't. He actually bid, and then there's some clause in there. I mean, otherwise,
So had
we
our
would have
bid
done.
not come in, you would be getting $226,000 for it.
Right.
So
So-
withdraw your bid.
Is there an official way to protest? Do you guys have an official protest protocol?
I mean, the board could choose not to proceed and take it under advisement, and we could look at it further. I think it's,
I would recommend we do that. Because I think he's right. I think that the way that the
Intent.
bid proposal was put together to allow somebody to escalate just with an open-ended escalation like that is not appropriate. I think that when somebody is $40,000 above the other bid, and then you just allow it to be whatever value that they deem necessary by whatever amount, that's taken away from the true spirit of a sealed bid. That's, at least in my opinion. So I would advise we
The
take
only
it.
feedback I give you is that the board kind of set a precedent on the North Park lots when they accepted a bid with an escalator.
I think that's a little different property because we have multiple lots to deal with there. I think this is different here, and I would have a difficult time accepting the lower bid with the option just to continue to escalate when the other party doesn't have that same option, because we never wrote it into the contract that that was available. So I would recommend that we take it under advisement.
I'm going to second that. I don't know that the escalation isn't valid. We did it before, but I think before we get too far down the road and get into a corner here, I'd rather take it under
We
advisement
want
and
to do the
study
right-
this a little
We want to do the
further.
right thing.
Yes.
So,
And I think it's only fair to look at the highest bid as an appropriate winning bid at this point in time, but with that said, I think we still take it under advisement.
May I join in this
if you
discussion?
get in front of the microphone, please. Name and address.
Dan
please.
Clark,
Mhm.
307 Sherman. I'm a little bit intrigued by this whole process at this point in the game, obviously. I've been waiting for several years to have the opportunity to purchase the property, having leased it for the last 10 or more, I think. I've been a big supporter of Ignite from day one and champion all of your efforts. I put forth what I felt was a very solid bid, and I think I went all in with my maximum. And I was under the impression this would be settled here and now, and it's a little disconcerting to think that we're going to have to go back and start over because someone that chose not to bid that much or go that high is upset about not getting it. So I understand you'll have to do what you have to do, but you've already set precedents. That's on record. I think it's more than the property's worth to start with. We obviously both have interest in it for our own personal reasons. So anyway, I'd like to see this settled, frankly. And if it goes legal, I mean, we're all going legal at this point. And if that's where you want to go, that's where we'll go, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you.
All I would say is I think Mick and I may differ in our opinions about this a little bit. I'm not sure the escalation clause isn't valid, but I'm getting a little bit uncomfortable with this position we're in right now, though, so that's why I seconded his motion to take it under advisement. I don't know if there's any other opinions here.
I don't think the statute is going to give us any guidance on this. I think it's really just a kind of an interpretation of what the language says, but we can certainly, provide you guys some time to think about that and, and come back and address it later.
Do you want to schedule it? I mean, are we going to pick a date to address it, or?
We should give a date to the bidders, or at least at some kind of a time frame.
Agreed.
I mean, next board meeting, I think, is too late.
That's too late.
Yeah, it should be sooner.
I would just recommend, I hate to make a decision where you still feel like, legally you might want to have a chance to review it. And we are kind of trying to do this in a hurried up fashion right now. So, I mean, even 24 hours.
Well, we'd have to get back together and have a special meeting, so we're going to have 24 hours notice.
Okay.
So we'd have to probably poll the board to get availability for a special meeting date and then give the 24-hour notice that's required. And then we could give notice to the bidders.
Okay. What's the feeling of the rest of the board? That's just my opinion.
You made a recommendation, but not a motion.
That's
so-
correct.
Well, I thought you made a motion and I
I
seconded
made a
it.
recommendation.
Oh,
If you
I'm
want
sorry.
a motion, I'll make a motion of that, just so that we have it on record. I'll make a motion. Okay. We take it under advisement.
And I'll second that.
Okay? And then for further discussion, that would be to reconvene then at a time that you choose, and we'll make sure we follow our process of putting in the 24-hour notice and,
Well, a time that, yeah, that is convenient for the board.
But not, you'd let it do it sooner than later.
oh yeah,
I think it should be sooner than later.
way sooner than later.
We may even get some attorney's letters in the meantime, but I think, I wouldn't mind you having a little bit more time to research this, see if there's any,
Any case
what
law.
I would say, case law or any, yeah, it's just any,
Really.
see if you can find any more guidance on this just before we do something, and then it's a lot more difficult. And this motion may or may not pass, but that's why I seconded Mick's motion.
Ready? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Do we need to, Mr. Chairman, discuss a date now since that passed?
Yeah, that was, okay?
Should we shoot for by Friday?
I'd like to get it done as quickly as possible. We can notice it tomorrow morning and give 24 hours and have a Friday morning meeting.
How long does the attorney think she needs to check precedent and case law and get guidance? Friday's a little quick. I don't want to take too long, but I'm just wondering what
I
you
mean,
think.
I think we could do it by Friday.
Okay.
Let's shoot for Friday.
Friday, 1 o'clock? Friday morning, Friday, what's people's
Friday morning.
availability?
I'm not going
We
to be
gotta have a
available
quorum.
till Friday, but there'll probably still be a
We could
quorum.
call in too, can't we?
Yeah.
We can call
Yeah,
in,
we'll have
yeah.
to-
Need one person present in person.
Yeah, we only need one physical body.
1 o'clock will be great for me.
Five,
Some
Friday,
meetings
1
in the
o'clock.
morning.
Friday, 1 o'clock?
Friday at 1 o'clock, okay.
And I can be there physically too.
I can too.
Sorry about the confusion.
I'm not confused.
Obviously, we are.
Escalation clause, pretty standard operation.
I just think it makes better sense to take our time and do it right instead of having bad feelings and stuff, so, anyway.
And that's the purpose of the private bid, is put your best offer. If you're willing to pay $325, you could have bid $325.
Okay,
Well, that's it for now.
Thank you.
great, thank you, guys.
And move on to the next item on the agenda. Presentation from the Performing Arts Center feasibility study. Performing Arts Center,
Thank you.
How you doing?
thank you.
Thanks.
Nicole,
Get me out of there.
hello.
Hi,
Have you seen the presentation?
I'm Nicole Kaler, Executive Director for CDA 2030. I'm here today to introduce Tom Hazinski of HVS Convention, Sport, and Entertainment Facilities Consulting. He will be here to present the draft report of the Performance Arts Center, a market analysis and feasibility study. For the audience, I will mention that this study was funded by Ignite CDA as a request of the city and Ignite joint meeting and was facilitated by CDA 2030. A performing arts center is an action in our implementation plan under the community and identity focus area.
Do you have the microphone on for Nicole, please?
It is.
Great.
Then you can get a little closer then, please.
Get a little closer, is that better?
No, can't hear you.
No,
Move the microphone, adjust the microphone, please.
I don't want to. How about that? Can you hear me now? Okay. So before I hand the mic over to Tom, I'd like to recognize our advisory committee that worked to develop the RFP, selected HVS out of 11 proposals, and reviewed the draft reports. Thank you to Jimmy McAndrews, Shawnee Lay, J.R. Norvell, Olivia Metz, Hillary Anderson, and Kiki Miller. Now I will turn the mic over to Tom.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nicole.
Welcome, Tom.
And thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. First of all, I'd like to thank Nicole and the steering committee and all the members of the Performing Arts community that helped us with this study. We couldn't have completed it without all the information we gathered and all the cooperation we got. So and they've been wonderful to work with, and we really appreciate their help. If you give me a moment, I'll call up the presentation. Okay, here we go. So I understand that you have had an opportunity to review our full report, which is rather lengthy. So this is an attempt to boil it down to some essential elements. And but I would like to ask you to interrupt me as I go through it if you have questions or comments, and make sure that I'm explaining everything well, or if there's any confusion that arises, just let me know, and I'll try to explain it. So first of all, let's review our scope. We broke it into two phases where we did an initial market and demand assessment, and Kathy Surratt and I came and visited here in February, and we held a series of meetings with stakeholders, with the steering committee, toured all the various sites that were under consideration at the time, and otherwise investigated and gathered information on the community related to performing arts. Then we performed a market assessment, and I'll go through that, understanding all the indicators of what kind of performing arts center demand there is. We looked at the industry trends, and we looked at how participation rates in the arts have been evolving nationally and how that might affect Coeur d'Alene. We did a lot of interviews subsequent to our meetings as well. We looked at a whole bunch of competitors in comparable facilities to see how a new facility would fit into this market. And based on all of that research, we provided an initial building program recommendation. With that recommendation, then we looked at sites as to their capacity, and you'll see a wide range of criteria evaluating various sites. We then projected demand and attendance. And with that, we had an interim conference call with the steering committee and took comments and made sure everyone understood where we were going. And then we moved on to the second phase, which was doing the financial projections, looking at ownership options, and also looking at the impact of it on the community economically and otherwise, and looked at financing strategies. So we're at the end of the assignment now, and but this is not a final document. It still is a draft. Part of our scope is to bring it to you, to receive your comments, receive comments of the community, and then issue a final draft. So don't think anything here is necessarily set in stone, as we can always gather more information, and we could make adaptations if necessary. So first of all, let's. Is that clear to everyone? I mean, so I really want you to be involved and to have an opportunity to have your input. So first of all, how do we look at the market when we did our market assessment? So we have data on economics and demographics by drive times. We use a system called ESRI data. It's a geo-based system that has tons of data on businesses, the economy, household income, on everything you want to know about the economics of a community, and you can get it within driving distances. And so we looked at 3 different distances, 60, 120, and 180-minute drive times, and looked at the populations and various characteristics of those populations. And you could see that what that includes here on this map. One of the really interesting features that makes Coeur d'Alene different than a lot of its competitors is its proximity to Spokane. From a competitive point of view, it is competing potentially with a lot of venues in Spokane, but also it's a separate community and with a separate identity. So it has kind of a dual identity, whereas you'll see some of the comps are really more standalone, small city destinations, and others are not. So so we looked at the local venues, and you're probably familiar with most of these. We actually talked to members of the tribe about the Casino Events Center. We toured Schuler Performing Arts, and then Panita and Sandpoint, which we didn't have an opportunity to tour, but it's one that's fairly close, which those three are ones that potentially have overlap in utilization of a new performing arts center here. The others are smaller venues, including where we are today, that don't really have a wide range of capabilities. The Kroc Center is a very interesting venue too, and it does a lot of community theater and would have overlap as well, but it's really not designed as a performing arts venue. It's more of a presentation theater. We also, and you'll see in the report, we looked at a number of other comparable venues that are ones in the wider region. Then we looked at some that we thought were good models, and you'll see some at the end of this report. I have some case studies. So one of the things that is important to understand is the participation in the arts. This is data from the National Endowments of the Arts. They do recurring studies and analyze the participation. And this chart shows participation in various art forms by age. So you can see that it's that 55 to 64 age range, which has in most forms of performing arts the highest participation. And then also it provides a comparison of relative participation rates. So by participation, I mean that someone sees one or more concert in this genre of performing arts per year. And so musicals are most frequently seen, and classical music and non-musical plays follow that. Dance is lower down, and opera, it has the lowest level of participation. So when we look at the economics or the age profile of Coeur d'Alene, we can look at how its participation might vary. Coeur d'Alene has a little older population than the U.S. as a whole, and so that actually is favorable to some of these forms of art. But for other types of events, concerts, the participation is more youth-oriented. So that helped us form the kind of part of our building program recommendation in terms of what arts would be accommodated in these facilities. So income is also key to participation. So this graph shows a percent of participants by income levels, starting at 20,000 and going up to 150,000 more in personal income. There's a clear line in all upward trajectory. As there's more income, there's more participation. And you really need to get into being, before you get significant participation into that $50,000, $75,000 personal income range, and then it escalates from there. So again, if you look at Coeur d'Alene, its population, its median income is lower than the national average, but as you move out into those wider rings of population, the income is larger. It gets closer to the national average, but even in the wider rings, income is lower than a national average. So that's important to keep in mind and keep us realistic about the projections of potential attendance at a venue like this. Educational level is another key factor. More education, the more participation in the arts. It's a clear correlation in all forms. So more on the competitive and comparable venues. These are ones that are within 200 miles of Coeur d'Alene. Now, when we say competitive, it means there could be some overlapping competition for events, especially touring events. But something like the I&B Performing Arts Center in Spokane is so much larger than what we would envision for Spokane that there's not a lot of overlap. Certain, especially touring concerts, need houses of specific size, and they don't want to be in empty houses. So Martin Woldson Theater at the Fox and even the George and Jane Dennison Theater in Missoula. They're much larger, can accommodate larger touring acts. We wouldn't envision that happening here. But the other performing arts complexes, some are a little bit farther away. So in Montana and Big Fork and the Spokane Civic Theater, those have seating capacities more in the range of what we might envision here, and there could be some overlap in the demand for them. These are regional venues in small markets in Idaho and neighboring states. So this is a further pushing out of looking at comparables, and you can see their seating capacity ranges from a little over 2,000 to 450. So I think some lessons can be learned from these, and in terms of, and there would be some overlap in terms of the drive times to these venues and to Coeur d'Alene. These are some comparable venues that we looked at nationally that wouldn't in any way be competitive, but we think are interesting examples of something that might be appropriate for Coeur d'Alene. And we looked at those ranging in capacity from 435 seats to 984. So any questions about the comp set? At the end of it, I'm going to go through some more specific examples, and some of these are included in terms of how they're owned, operated, and financed. Okay. We also, so you saw the participation rate data in terms of income and age of population. So these are all the comps that we looked at. It looks like a long list, but you'll see Coeur d'Alene in boldface there. And the idea of ranking them like this from highest to lowest, let's see, take the first column there in terms of 60-minute drive time population. Coeur d'Alene actually is above average with that in that respect, and that's due to its proximity to Spokane compared to some of these other communities like Rapid City that may be a similar sized city but aren't adjacent to a larger metro area. So really positive population. And we look at other number of businesses too. The same thing happens because of its proximity to Spokane. There's a lot of businesses, but median household income, you'll see it's it's in the middle of the pack. If you look at other things, Coeur d'Alene's demographics in terms of median age, it's a little older, which for more of the fine arts is a good thing. For concerts, maybe not so good. Its percent with a college degree is a little bit above average, this ESRI database that we use provides information on how much is spent in entertainment. So this expenditure on tickets and that what you see there is an index. If you have an index of 100, it means you're at the national average of spending per resident. And so Coeur d'Alene is below that national average, but it's higher than a lot of these other cities in which have performing arts venues. So again, above average here on the index, but not above the national average. Here that you're being compared with very large cities, New York or Chicago, where people spend a lot more money on arts and entertainment. Any questions about that? So the idea of doing that demographic analysis is to see how Coeur d'Alene fits into a big picture of how other cities that have active, successful performing arts venues. And you can see that there are many without as good of economics and demographics that have successful venues. So it indicates that Coeur d'Alene could be successful in terms of attracting an audience, a decent, solid demographic, economic base to support a venue. So sites, there's lots of sites, and we couldn't have done this work without Nicole and everybody, because it takes a lot of knowledge, intimate knowledge of the community and how these sites fit in. We toured all of them when we were here. and took notes, but it's also having a feel for what's going on around this. So it was really kind of a joint exercise to evaluate these sites. We had a few, 2 or 3 long phone calls going over all the criteria and how we're evaluating them. So, and this is A through L. These are all the sites we looked at. So you can see there's a cluster downtown. There's some then along 90, and then there's K&L on the eastern side of the city. So, so these are the sites that we looked at, and this is how we looked at them. Okay, so we did 2 things. First of all, we identified a set of criteria that we want to evaluate them on. If you look in our report, each one of these criteria is just criteria. Everyone is described, and then we ranked its importance on a scale of 1 to 5. So, so compliance with existing zoning is, it's a pretty flexible thing. The city could change zoning and it's not so important. We gave it a 2, but having capacity to build a program is obviously very important. So we gave that a 5. And then we ranked each site on each of these criteria on a scale of 1 to 3. So if 1 was if it did not comply with the criteria, 2 if it partially complied, and 3 it complied with the criteria. So it's a multiplication of its importance and how they scored in the criteria, 1, 2, or 3, that gives the total score on each of these. And these criteria fall into some large buckets. Of the first is site considerations, looking at the physical characteristics of the site itself. Is it big enough? What's it next to? Is there retail and dining and entertainment around it? Is it a site that's easily acquired? Is there capacity for future expansion? Are there potential environmental impacts that we need to consider? So those are what we call the site-specific considerations. Then we looked at urban impacts. So what other kind of development might occur around it? Is it compatible with neighboring land uses? You don't want to plunk it down right in the middle of a residential neighborhood, right? So is it safe? Is it displacing existing users? It doesn't comply with zoning. And then access is really important for drive-in, for parking, for service vehicles. Is it going to create congestion? And what about access to public transportation? Although there's not, in some others, in a bigger city, that would be a higher criteria, higher importance. Here we only gave it a 1 because there's not a lot of public transportation. And then finally, financial considerations. Is it something that lends itself to getting funding sources? Are the land assembly costs high? Is there something about it that would make construction costs higher or lower? And are there opportunity costs here? Could there be other development on that site that might be a better use for that site? And then is there a lot of need for infrastructure? Are the roads and sewers, electricity, is that already there? Or are you going to have to bring it to the site? So that's an important financial consideration. So we went through each site and gave them a 1 to 3 on those and multiplied it by the weight. And this is how they ranked out. So it gives us sort of a numerical assessment. And I don't want to say this numerical assessment is the be-all and end-all, because there could be certain, maybe a fatal flaw. Let's say you can't really acquire a site. That could be a fatal flaw and might knock it out. Or there could be some other compelling reason, maybe cooperation with an existing land use or something that would be if the sites are closer related, it could propel one site to the top. So we're not making a specific site recommendation, but giving you an analysis of what we think are superior or inferior based on the criteria that we've laid out. And I should also add that there could be other sites that would show up and consider as this project might move forward. There could be other sites brought in to be considered. So, but Riverstone, Atlas Mill, and HREI were the ones that were. And then Independence Point, all those, even Wild Waters, they're close to 200 or above. They're all viable sites. None of them had what we saw as a fatal flaw. The fairgrounds fared very poorly, not because of, obviously has capacity, but the proximity in the neighborhood, and all of that was not, and the adjacent land uses didn't really fit the bill. So it really did not fare well in the analysis. So
Real quick, what's downtown north? Is that Midtown?
let's go back to the map. Downtown north is is.
Did that take in Midtown? Not really.
Yeah. Can you help me out, Nicole, on this?
It's between Garden and Wallace.
Yeah.
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 So I wasn't really clear on it. Okay.
It's the parcel on the corner of Indiana and Second.
Oh.
Lakers. All right.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Better use.
Other site questions? So, this is, I mean, the purpose of it is not to be definitive and say, you must build here. Its purpose is to, first of all, educate ourselves about the criteria. And I would invite you to look at the priority we placed on those criteria. And you may have a different set of priorities than the consensus of what we developed. And it would be great to run those with different priorities and see if the same sites emerge. You know, the priority issue is a real judgment call, and there could be a lot of valid judgments for a lot of different reasons that it would place different priorities on different criteria. So, yeah, you can do the math and play with it however you want. It's a fun thing. We'd be happy to send our Excel spreadsheet, and you could do it to your heart's content. So. So what are we recommending then? Given that our understanding of the industry, you know, looking at all the industry trends, looking at the economics and demographics of the community, having done a survey of potential users and focus groups of potential users, we generated this building program. So what we're suggesting is a 700 to 800 seat multi-purpose theater. So if you think of that in terms of the regional venues that exist today, puts it sort of in the middle of the pack. It's not competing with IMB, you know, it's not a 2,700 seat, but it's larger than existing venues in Coeur d'Alene today. So it would definitely elevate your capacity for new types of events. If you have a theater with that many seats, you want to be multi-level. That's an important, in terms of making it intimate, also making it more flexible so that it could be used for smaller events where you might close off a balcony and just use the first floor. And the house would still seem full and it would be much more intimate. It also has an important cost implication. If you build a balcony, you're talking about a more expensive development, right? So, you know, lobbies and theaters are becoming more and more generous. You know, you walk into the Rialto or whatever you see, or old vaudeville theaters, they have tiny, tiny lobbies, right? Now there are event spaces, and there's a lot more, usually have much more capacity. So a large lobby with concessions, coat room, public restrooms, that's very inviting. There is a financial aspect to that in two respects. One is that it costs more to build a larger lobby, but they also become revenue generators because you're selling stuff out of there. You can also rent the space out for events. It also creates a real presence of the venue. And you find most theater days are very open, so it's like a transparent kind of thing where it makes a great street presence and all that. So we're recommending a proscenium stage with wing space and a hard surface. Now, what you see in the stage, whether it's 60 feet deep, 90 feet wide, what you don't see is important. And one thing that Coeur d'Alene doesn't have today is any theater with really good staging capacity, with flies, ample storage, and wing space to accommodate various types of performing arts that need that to do that well. Musicals, opera, all the performing arts, need for sets, and they need a good offstage capacity. And a good efficient fly loft and rigging system where you can fly things in and out. Also, because musicals are the most popular form of art in Coeur d'Alene, you definitely want an orchestra pit, and for up to 30 musicians. And then what we found in terms of interviewing arts groups and identifying what the needs are, there's need for events that have 400 to 500 people. There's need for 700 to 800 people capacity, but there's also much smaller stuff that is going on, more experimental theater or, and what we envision in order to address that need is a multi-purpose room that serves as a black box theater. It serves as a rehearsal room, and it could even have audience seating of about 100. So that room could also be used for events, for social events, for a banquet, or lots of different kinds of social events. So it could be a very busy room. It has, by providing rehearsal capacity, it's really important that you have that, because then the facility, the venue will be more available for performances. The orchestra can be practicing in that room, and a musical could be being set up on the stage. So the orchestra wouldn't have to take the stage for all of its rehearsals. So that's an important aspect of getting much higher utilization of the venue, as well as serving the smaller potential events. And back of house, we've laid out some objectives there. The multipurpose space would be for education, private rentals. Like the lobby could have, it might have, you could hold an art show in there. It could be a lot of uses for the public spaces in the building. We laid out the dressing rooms, what would be appropriate for supporting a house of this size, scene shops and all the back of house. It's really important to a well-functioning venue. There's a whole nother layer of technical requirements that if this project were to move forward, one would have to analyze. How much power you need, what's your candlelight, and all of this is something that's more specialized. It's not something that an economics consultants like us do. That there are, our venue planners that do this more toward the engineering component of the building. So that's what we're recommending. Any questions about what we're recommending? All right. So demand projections. So one of the ways there's a couple ways we approach demand projections, because this is looking into the future, and there's no history here to figure out what kind of attendance you get. We did though gather data on all the performing arts events that are occurring in Coeur d'Alene today, and we from that, building that up, you see that estimated attendance. That's what we're estimating annual attendance is today in Coeur d'Alene for these different types of events. We went to every arts organization we could find, asked them how many people are coming every year, and how many events they have. And so we add all of that up, and we get the estimated attendance that's actually occurring. The demand potential comes from this analysis of participation trends. So we take the national participation trends and we adjust them for the economics and demographics, we know that this many 55 to 65-year-olds participate in that form of art. And so we assume that that's, if Coeur d'Alene performed at that national level, what would the potential demand be? And we can see in every category, you are not meeting demand potential except in non-musical plays. There's, you kind of exceed the national average there, but everything else is lower. So there's, and that is likely to be driven by the lack of supply of space to host these events. Whereas with non-musical plays.
Classical music, is that all music that's non-theater?
No.
Could you define classical music?
I would define it as symphonic music.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
it could
not
also
taking-
include chamber music.
That's what I
yeah,
was
yeah.
figuring you were going to, but so where you're not showing there are music that's not classical music, that might be a touring group coming through.
Yes, yeah, that is, yeah, this only pertains to these, the, I don't know if you want to use this term, the fine arts, but we're deal with touring in a different way.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
yeah, we will, but yeah, there's a whole category of events that don't fit into these categories that would potentially, but we have the NEA data, which allows us to estimate potential demand. So importantly, there's a gap here, and that between potential and actual, and that shows that, you know, a new supply of performing arts space could be addressed by more participation. And again, that participation is not just Coeur d'Alene, it's from that 180-minute drive time we're thinking about. Because you would get people coming out of Spokane and elsewhere to come to events here. So you asked about touring entertainment, I think, is what you were addressing, right? That was a great question. So there, in order to estimate that, we talked with promoters that bring these events and asked about, you know, if you had this kind of capacity, what could you bring? And we also looked at what similar sized venues attract in similar markets, what they attract. And so we assumed that there would be 8, and we conservatively, even though it might be a 700, 800 seat capacity in the house, we only assumed that there would be 600 on average. So some shows are going to be sold out, some are going to be only half sold, some would be smaller. So we have, that's more the popular rotating concert music. And you'll see then local entertainment is not something in that NEA study. All the other ones below, touring and entertainment and down, are events that are really locally generated, meetings and assemblies, banquets that you might do in the Black Box Theater or in the lobby. We base these on what similar venues do. So it would be built, you know, busy building. 337 events, that doesn't mean it's used that many days a year, because many of these, there might be more than one event on any given day, something in the Black Box, something in the main theater, or kind of an assembly event in the afternoon, and then a performance in the evening. So it doesn't mean that it's lit up, you know, 337 days a year, but it could be a very active facility. And then given these assumptions or estimates about average attendance, we can calculate what estimated total attendance would be, and that would be over 70,000 people a year. So that's where we are with demand. So with that demand in place, then we can move into financial projections. So what we do is we start with the demand and say, okay, what revenue, what food and beverage, what ticket sales revenue would this type of event generate? What's the reasonable per cap? Or if you have a touring show, what share of that revenue are you going to get from the touring show? So we went by event type and attached certain parameters of revenue generation and produced a pro forma. So, but we also had to make some assumptions about ownership and management and how this would be managed. So we had, what I'm going to show you here are 3 different models of potential ownership that we see in some of the comparable venues. The first is a public ownership, a city or county owning it. If they own it, they can, it could be, sometimes they're operated as a city department, and you see that in Great Falls and in Provo. They're actually operated by the city as a department of the city. Or you can hire a third-party private manager, pay them a fee to run it. Or you might have a nonprofit organization that steps in to run it. So they don't own it, but they may have a long-term lease for $1 a year, and then they have the responsibility for the operation. Then, so, you know, you'll see that most of these venues don't break even. The larger ones sometimes make a profit, but most of them don't break even. So you have to provide debt service if it's not funded completely through donations, and you have to support ongoing operations. So under public ownership, typically there are public sources, and then with a nonprofit, often there are ongoing charitable sources. There's development program within the operation that generates annual contributions. There's galas that pump money into the facility. So that's a kind of a public ownership model. And then 2 others that we've seen in the comparable facilities, and like at Spokane, their nonprofit ownerships owns the Civic Theater in Montana. Alberta Bear Theater is owned by a nonprofit, and the Performing Arts, the PAC of Rapid City owns the Rapid City. These are all nonprofits. So nonprofit can typically, if it owns it, it also operates it. It is, it's the ownership and the operation then become merged, and then there's more with nonprofits. There's more of a reliance on charitable contributions for operations, but there's often city, state, county grants that flow into these facilities. University ownership is another option that we've seen in a lot of these because they're university venues, and they're typically operated by a university department, and sometimes they're just part of the ongoing university budget, and sometimes they're also supported by charitable contributions. So those are the 3 ownership and then subsequent operating models that are used. We haven't envisioned a new one that no one else is using, but so and that's an open question as to how this would be done in terms of the ownership and operation. So we had to make some assumption though for the purpose of doing a pro forma. So we assumed the public ownership model. That's not that we're recommending it necessarily, but we had to assume something in order to come up with some numbers. And then we assumed that a nonprofit would be managing it. So the ownership is really, would probably be responsible for initial construction and then ongoing capital maintenance, and the nonprofit would take over the operation and presumably raise the money to keep it funded, or perhaps receive ongoing public support. And then you would establish an independent board of directors to oversee the development, management, and operation of that nonprofit. So the benefits of that nonprofit and public ownership is the ability to raise money. And then instead of it, another option would be to, and you see this in large cities with venues that are dedicated to a specific tenant, like Symphony Hall in Chicago is the Chicago Symphonies. They do other art series in it, but it's the CSO's venue. Well, that's not really possible here that one entity could dominate the operation. So, and that it would be more single use. It needs to be multi-purpose. So having a nonprofit would provide a mechanism for providing equal access to all the various users that want to get into this facility. That's an issue. I mean, competition for the time, everyone wants to do their shows at the same time. Someone has to manage that. And I have to say, one of the things I was really impressed with here, in talking among the arts groups, is the high level of cooperation. Because having worked in other cities, sometimes there is an intense amount of competition and rivalry among different groups, especially if they're competing for space. And one group is feeling put upon or left out or being disadvantaged in one way or another, not getting what they want, and it can create a lot of tension in the arts community. We didn't see any of that here. We saw people really interested in helping each other out. It was a very refreshing kind of attitude that we got when we did the focus groups. It was very striking, and I think a real positive thing about the arts community here. You know, the other thing is that if you have city ownership, the city can make it consistent with its own goals, you know, if you have a board, the board can offer assistance when required. There's some real benefits of this structure. But you have to staff it, and, you know, given a facility this size and looking at what other venues have to do in terms of permanent staff, there's about 8 permanent staff is what we're projecting, and the salary costs, salaries and benefits costs are, we estimated over $650,000. So that's the largest slug of operating expense. So then I hope you can read this okay. So this is a pro forma for a stabilized year of demand. So, you know, when a venue first opens, it's not going to have all the events it will eventually have. It will take some time. We call it the ramp-up period. It'll take some time for the demand to ramp up. And we have it stabilizing in 2025. And these are in future year dollars as well. So, so what we show is it generating about 1.3 million in revenue, but the expenses exceeding that. You can see I showed 650,000 in salaries on the other sheet. This is inflated by 2025. That's nearly $800,000 in future dollars. So it would have to run an operating loss, and then we assume that every year you'd set aside money for capital maintenance and build up a fund. So it would need a subsidy in a range of $400,000, $500,000 a year. So don't take these numbers as like it's definitely going to be $400,000. There's a lot of variables that could change this. We think this is the midpoint of reasonable estimates. It could be better, it could be worse. We don't know enough at this point to be really precise in these estimates, but think of this as a middle point of potential outcomes. The other thing we do too is, you know, we have what we call a fixed variable component of our model. So certain expenses are fixed and others vary with the level of utilization. So we model it that way. So when you have a facility that's underperforming, it's going to show a much higher deficit than one that's performing well. And if you look at a report, the earlier deficits are much higher, and then they taper down as stabilization because those fixed expenses are there, even if you have lower levels of utilization and less revenue. Okay. So then, just to put it in a perspective of other venues and what their operating profit and loss is. So you can see the larger ones and very active ones. There's only 2 of them that show a positive income, but they're much larger venues. The IMB, they generate a lot of concert demand, and those are more profitable. And then Morris Performing Arts Center in South Bend is it's a city-operated facility. It's very successful. It does a lot of events in addition to performing arts, a lot of food and beverage revenue generated there. But all the other ones have various degrees of operating loss. And you can see, you know, even smaller venues like the 215-seat theater is showing a $500,000 loss. The Provo Center, I think, is a real comparable one. It's showing a $300,000 loss. So we're kind of in the range of those, on the lower end of the range, because of the size of the venue, and also because we think, its multi-use would really help its financial operations, because it'd be a pretty active building, given all the needs that are here in the city.
Do you have any idea, excuse me, just say for instance, we take Provo and Butte, just because they're kind of relatively close to us. How are they making up those deficits? Is it general fund money from the city? Is it donations? Is it
Well, that's
renewal
what the
money?
next two columns show. So they, actually, Butte got more donations than it did in this deficit. It probably used the rest of it for some kind of capital reserve, right? And others, in addition to getting contribution donations, or instead of that, they get public sector support from the local government, or if it's a university venue, from the university.
But is Provo, I mean, do you know, is that the city or the county, or is it?
Provo is the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not BYU or something like that?
No, it's a
okay.
city. It's a city. It was a converted, what was it before it was a theater? A library. It was a library converted into a theater. So it was a city-owned property, and they converted it to a theater. Yeah. And but it was the Covey, Stephen Covey, did the donation. Covey of Covey fame.
Yeah, the motivational guy, yeah.
Yeah, right.
I'm amazed that Butte can raise that kind of money.
That's Crested Butte.
Oh, Crested Butte, okay, yeah.
Crested
I
Butte.
gotta
That's
pay
Colorado. That's not Montana.
But I'm still surprised that they can make that, raise
Yeah.
that kind of money though,
Well,
because that's
yeah.
not a very big town.
Yeah, yeah, but it's, maybe there's summer resort, and people
Yeah.
with wealth come there, and they want their,
That's a lot of money.
yeah. So, yeah, so you can see this is what others have had to do to survive. And there's a significant amount of fundraising or public support necessary on an ongoing basis. So it has to be worthwhile. So that's why we talk about economic and fiscal impacts. And I always caution people about not fixating too much on dollars of new spending, although that's important. It's not the fundamental reason why these venues exist. They exist to foster the arts. They exist to enliven and heighten the culture of a city, to make the quality of life of the residents better. And that doesn't have a dollar return. So, but it's still important to think about what kind of economic and fiscal impacts this would have. So we do it in a quantitative way that ignores those qualitative benefits on quality of life and so on. So this is how we do it. We look at, well, how much new demand would you be getting? So there's existing performing arts demand in the market today. How much new demand would you be bringing? How much new visitation would be associated with that? There would be and that's an interesting advantage Coeur d'Alene has, in that you would get a lot of income coming out of that may be leaving to go to Spokane now, would be staying here or coming from Spokane. So you get net new demand, which we've estimated. Then we attach spending parameters to those, and that gives us an estimate of what we call gross direct spending. So it's all the dollars that people, when they come, they might have a meal, they might go shopping as well. So there's other associated spending, not just on the theater itself, although that's an important part of it. Then there's the spending of the arts groups that's involved. So we look at all of that spending, and we estimate the gross direct spending. And then we run it through what's called an input-output model. And the model we use is called IMPLAN. It's widely used, and it's a model of your local economy. So we buy data that populates this model, and it shows all the sectors of the economy and how much is spent in each one. And it's set up such that if you add spending to one of those sectors, it shows what the effects are on all the other sectors. Okay, it's this big table of interactions between different parts of the economy. So we generate, this is often called multiplier effects of new spending. So as the money circulates in the economy. So first of all, some of the gross direct spending might not actually land in Spokane. So if it's to a promoter that is not in Spokane, it's not going to land here, right? Or if someone buys a T-shirt while they're in town, some of that money is going to China. The other is the retail margins that that person gets, right? So we take that gross direct spending and we get it down to net direct spending, all right? And then we also measure what's called indirect. So let's, as an example, someone goes out to eat a meal at a restaurant, and the restaurant then has to buy the food, supplies. To the extent that those are bought in Coeur d'Alene, it's an indirect spending, okay? And then so indirect spending is a new business spending that occurs as a result of that direct spending, okay? And then induced spending is a new income that's generated. So let's say you have a waiter or a waitress is wealthier because there's more, because there's more restaurant. To the extent that that person spends money in Coeur d'Alene, that new income, that's an induced spending. And those are called the multiplier effects. So they ripple through a lot of sectors of the economy, and that's what this model does for us. So, yeah, so it puts out the total, the sum of those three is the total output of it. And then what the model also tells us, well, how many jobs are supported by that amount of spending in each sector. And so we get an estimate of jobs. So it's not the jobs at the venue, it's all the jobs that are supported throughout the community by that spending, okay? And then we ask, well, how would you tax that output? So what's the government share of that output? Because some of it's taxed with lodging taxes or sales tax or whatever. So, so this is the high-level summary, and there's a lot of detail on that, but this just gets right to the end of the overall economic impact, and that would be net direct, induced, and indirect spending would be on an annual basis. This is, estimated for a stabilized year demand in today's dollars. It would be $3.9 million annually. And the taxes that would be generated off that spending would be about roughly $210,000 a year. So supporting 31 jobs in the community. So again, those are the numbers. But again, I caution you, that's not the driving rationale for this venue. It's about the arts, and it's about creating better arts, and it's about enlivening the culture of the community. It's about creating a better tourist attraction as well. But these are just the numbers side of that overall impact. So that's the meat of our study. I want to walk through a couple case studies just to give you a range of what people have spent on these venues, what different communities have spent on these venues, and one way to think of it is on a per seat cost. For a 50-seat theater here in Ketchum, Idaho, cost $14.5 million, and it was privately funded through a nonprofit with a donor campaign, and it's opening November of this year. So. Didn't happen overnight. They funded that nonprofit in 2001. It's opening in 2018. So a lot of these have long gestation periods. Don't be impatient. It takes a while. You have to build community consensus. You have to create a concept people are excited about, and you've got to get them to give money. Rapid City, South Dakota, opened in 2012. It was a $9.2 million renovation of a facility that used to be a school district facility. It has 830-seat capacity and another 174-seat studio venue. And the renovation cost $9.2 million, and the city contributed $3.2 million of that, $3.25 million. The rest was fundraised. Covey, which you talked about before, it was an $8.5 million library renovation, 670-seat capacity, so very comparable in size of what we're talking about here. It also has a 60-seat studio. City contributed $2.1 million, in form of a tax increment bond. So they got proceeds of debt from a tax increment district in downtown Provo. And then there was a contribution from the general fund, a one-time contribution. The rest was raised through fundraising and the naming rights for the Covey Center. It's operated by the city, and the city provides an annual subsidy of $350,000. Amarillo, we worked a lot in Amarillo. Kathy, who was a project manager for the study, has spent a lot of time in Amarillo. She knows this venue well. So this is larger. It's a $32 million facility on a new build. It opened in 2006. The city contributed $1.8 million in donated land. The remainder was collected through fundraising, and then there's a naming rights deal, which was good for $3 million to the capital cost. And then after 30 months, the debt service was retired from the city, and ownership was transferred to the city. So it operates it now as a part of the Amarillo Civic Center, which is our convention center, which is right across the street. So it's part of a larger operation. So they get some efficiencies over that combined operation. So those are some of the examples of what other cities have done and the effort and time that it's taken for them to do it. So next steps. First of all, immediate next step is to get your comments and, email us or work through Nicole, or whatever, so we can gather your comments and concerns so that we can finalize the report. We welcome comments from everybody, not just the board, but from everybody. And even if they're critical, we would love to get them, okay? Other things, a list of things that would need to be done to take next steps is, maybe identify other potential sites if there are any, and then narrow that down to a shorter list of sites. And then identify some funding sources for the conceptual planning and the cost estimation, the hardcore next steps. Okay, so as you read our study, you'll see it's economic primarily. It's economics, it's demographics. It's not exciting, pretty pictures of this venue. It's not a specific vision of a venue. And that, in order to raise money, you need that exciting vision. So you would want to engage an architectural firm to prepare a concept that fits in on a site. That concept does two things. One, it creates another opportunity for the community to have input on this and to assure that this facility is delivering what everyone needs. But it also allows one to do a pretty solid cost estimate. A cost estimator can work with a concept level plan, know the square footages, know the materials that are being used, know all the systems in the building that they have to pay for, and one could get a really reasonable cost estimate so you have a realistic target of what you would need in order to fund this facility. So it's called the order of magnitude cost estimate, but because the higher level of design you get, after that you would go into design development, and then you'd go into construction drawings, and then the project is finally bid on construction drawings, right? So you don't really know what it costs until those construction drawings are done and the construction people bid, and you know what steel costs the day that they bid on it, right? And all those kind of things. So, but you get really close with a cost, with a conceptual cost estimate, which you would want up front. And you don't have to spend, it's very expensive to do complete design. So you only need to do that first phase of design, which is what we call a concept plan. And then decisions that have to be made about the ownership and management model you would want to adopt. And if you go to the nonprofit entity, identify that nonprofit entity and formulate it. Make a final site selection, and then start developing a budget for the project and the sources of funding. So the budget needs to include a development budget where you're going to be raising funding for this. So you have to, people have to be hired to do this. So there has to be kind of some seed money to get the project moving. Unless there's ongoing investment in this in a small way at first, it's not going to go anywhere. And that's where a lot of projects die, because they can't just even put that initial funding to do the exploratory work. That's when you don't know for sure whether this thing's going to be built, right? It's risky money. You don't have to spend a ton, but you know, it's not cheap to get design, and if you go into a real development program, it's going to take professional work in order to do that properly. So there'll have to be some upfront costs that are at risk that the project may never even occur. But you would prepare your fundraising plans, develop goals, develop the materials. You'd launch the fundraising campaign. And then once you achieve a prescribed level, you don't have to have it fully funded, but once you have a high level of confidence that you can finish the funding of this facility, then you would bring in, you would complete the design and start getting a project delivery method, everything down to actually build the project. You would then have to negotiate all your third-party contracts, all the tenant leases. If you have naming rights, you have sponsorship agreements, food service arrangements, bringing in other vendors to maintain the facilities. All those have to be negotiated. And then you have to finalize and secure the project funding, and then you're ready to start construction. When you're starting construction, then you're marketing this facility right away. It may take a year or 2 years to build. You're selling this facility during that period. And then you establish all your operational goals, so it's all transparent. You've got solid policies and bookkeeping and reporting and so forth. So you have a really professional operation going forward. So those are the kind of process, the long-term process the community would have to go through to make this happen. It's a lot of effort, but it has to be a shared goal that everyone's excited about in order to make it happen. But I think the good news about our study is that we're not telling you, forget about it, Coeur d'Alene doesn't have any potential in the arts. It does, clearly does. It clearly has some real advantages because of the proximity of population, because of its status as a tourism destination. It really could be a wonderful asset for the community. I'd love to entertain questions if you have any.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, any comments or questions?
Thank you.
Will you be able to get a copy of this draft? It's going to be made available. Sorry, I'm sitting down. I'm Trigger, I'm Aspire, and also the Kroc Center. Yeah, will we be able to?
I have to defer to Nicole and the board on that question. I don't control the, it's you own it. So.
One idea, we could just post it on our website, and we could post it maybe on the Coeur d'Alene 2030 website too, if they'd be willing, and the city's website.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, bet. Good idea.
Well, I mean, would you like to provide any additional comments so we could finalize it before you put it on the website, or put it up on draft form?
I think draft form at this time.
Okay, all right.
How long are you going to allow for additional comments before you do your final draft?
It's up to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course,
Not
we
getting
would
cut
love
off
to get
then.
it done and signed and sealed, but it's not creating any work for us to, although, data gets old, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want it to let it collect dust.
I would recommend that we put it up on our website, the city's website, and, let, feedback for 30 days or something of that nature, then be done. I don't think we want to have just an open-ended
No, I agree.
opportunity here.
I agree. Put time on it, get it completed.
We'll do it.
If you're going to have excitement, you got to keep moving forward.
Yes.
All right. Any further comment for Tom?
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Pleasure, a real pleasure working here.
I enjoyed it.
Data, thank you very much. Nicole? Can you come back up, please? I guess, any other comments or anything from you?
I don't believe so.
Just in closing, we want to thank you and the Performing Arts Center Subcommittee and your board for all of the energy and the leadership and stuff you've taken in this, and it's, there's some good momentum, and we'll just need to keep it going.
Thank you.
Very much, thanks.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
All the information.
Moving on.
Just one question. Now that we have the draft and we're going to wait, say, 30 days for the final, is there a process in place to keep moving forward? Is there a steering committee other than CDA 2030, or how are we going to move forward with this? I mean, it's one thing to get a draft and information. It's another thing just to have it put on the shelf and have a shelf life of another 25 years.
Well, I think one of the things we have to understand is where the city council is going to land on this and kind of their take on what next steps might be. I'm not sure, I don't want to speak for CDA 2030, but I'm not sure if they're at a point of handing this off to Ignite and the city, or if they still want to remain in the loop. I think that's another part of the conversation.
I guess that's my question is, you know, we don't want everybody just pointing fingers and saying, well, I thought you were going to lead on this. So is this presentation going to be made to the city also?
No.
So the council will not see this?
The council was invited to attend tonight if they wanted to, and I think Councilman Kiki's here. They have copies of it, and so the next step would be probably this board working with city council on kind of maybe in a workshop venue to kind of see what the next steps might be.
Okay. I just don't want it to die. It's too much.
And I'm not sure, I'd have to talk to CDA 2030 and see what their level of interest is continuing.
Okay.
Let's discuss that.
But I think it's a good idea to put it up on those three websites, CDA 2030, the city and ours, and then just say, okay, we're going to take like a 2-week or a 4-week comment period, and then that would give us time then to plan to figure out what the next steps are.
Great. Thank you.
Okay? Good. Next would be the fiscal year 2018 budget amendment hearing.
So if you could call the hearing to order.
For state statute, then I will call the fiscal year 2018 budget hearing to order.
And so what I'll do, I'll kind of give just a brief overview of the amended budget. This has not changed since you saw it last month. So I'm not sure if you want me to go through it again or if you want to discuss it in any way, but it has not changed from what you saw in July. So
you're looking for board action then?
yeah, so actually now you would just see if there's any public comment about the.
Seeking any public comment then because the hearing's open for the 2018 budget amendment. Then seeing none, is it closed?
Then you close the public hearing.
Public hearing's closed, seeing no comment.
And then we have a resolution.
Roll call.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 18-04.
I second.
Adoption of fiscal year 2018 budget amendment. Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Jordan.
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes.
Metz.
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Chapkus.
Yes.
Arman.
Yes.
Next would be the opening of the fiscal year 2019 budget hearing is now open for public comment.
And I'll give a brief summary of issue. The budget has not changed since you last saw it, other than the addition of $161,570 of board-approved funding for the Memorial Grandstand project. As you recall, last month in July, you kind of upped that a little bit. So that's the only value that changed on this budget, and that's on line 31 for the Lake District. That $161,570 is included in that total now. Otherwise, the budget is the same.
Got it. Any public comment for our fiscal year 2019 budget? Seeing none, then I'll close that hearing and entertain a motion for that resolution.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 1805.
Adoption of the CDA fiscal year 2018
CDA fiscal year
budget.
2018 budget.
2019.
19 budget, excuse me.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Jordan?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Metz?
Yes.
Hoskins?
Yes.
Chapkus?
Yes.
Arman?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on then, Finance Committee, Commissioner Arman.
Okay, I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. First of all, for the Lake District balance sheet, under the assets category, the Lake District experienced a $612,120 decrease in cash assets from the June month end, due primarily to the biennial budget obligation payments. Fixed assets, there were no changes for the month. Other assets, the Lake District 2016 Series Note Reserve Account increased by $50 for the month of July. The ice plant IRA decreased by $25,715. Chamber of Commerce DDA had a decrease of $1,193. And the 609 Sherman Lofts IRA had a decrease of $16,688. Under the liabilities and fund balance, the bonds, two different bonds, 2016 Series Note line item value reflects a decrease of $868,147 due to the biennial note payment. The 2017 note series line item value reflects an increase of $226,778 due to a $638,000 July draw on the note minus the $411,222 biennial note payment. Tax increment payable IRA and DDA line item mirror the values under the assets, and all other liability parameters were unchanged, including the 2% credit due to the arts. The Lake District P&L, the Lake District received $1,221,277 in tax increment revenue from the county in July. Agency-funded initiatives were the following. The downtown parking garage line item was $643,688. The Memorial Field Grandstand project, $13,617 for design contract. And the Four Corners Memorial Park project, $402,601. Other P&L items, the professional fees line item includes $7,750 payment to the HVS Consulting for their work on the Performing Arts feasibility study. Taxes and increment payments line item shows a value of $43,597, which captures the principal payments for the IRAs and the DDA found on the balance sheet. Debt service and interest expense value of $59,572 as of the following. 216 series note had a $39,056 debt service, and a series 17 note had $20,517. All other P&L expenses and line items were normal for the month. Under the River District experienced $460,692 increase in cash assets from the June month end. Other assets, the Circuit at Saltese Way IRA had a decrease of $5,607. The Riverstone West Phase 2 IRA had a decrease of $34,664. Riverstone West Phase 1 OPA had a decrease of $183,249. And the Riverstone West Apartments 3 IRA had a decrease of $329. Under the liabilities and fund balance, tax increment payable line items mirror the under assets line items we just went through. All other parameters were unchanged or normal for the month. The River District P&L, the River District received $406,158 in tax increment revenue from the county in July. Agency-funded line items reflect a $41,790 payment to the Saltese Way project, plus a payment of $396,677 received from the Lake District per the Memorial Park Joint Work Project that results in a Saltese Way credit of $354,887. Professional fees line item includes $33,190 paid to Welsh Comer for planning efforts associated with the Atlas Waterfront Project. Taxes and increment payments line item shows a value of $223,849, which captures the payments and principal payments for the IRAs and OPA debt service on the balance sheet. And the debt service and interest expense values with $32,074, which were the following. Circuit at Saltese Way IRA, $3,505. Riverstone West Phase 2 IRA, $12,820. Mill River Seniors IRA, $5,836. The Riverstone West Apartments IRA, $6,683, and the Riverstone West Apartments 3 IRA, $3,230. All other expenditures, line items were normal for the month. So that is the financial report for the Lake District and the River District. Moving on to payables for the month of July to August here. Payable up to Elam and Burke, legal services, $1,680.45. The next was for Holly Troxel for legal payment of $4,357. The next was for Memorial Field Grandstand for Architects West Design and Project Management Contract for $6,959.88. The Atlas Mill Site Initiative, we had $38,855 broken out. Welsh Comer had $11,200. Welsh Comer Atlas Engineering Services, $18,875. And the Traffic Impact Study, $8,780. Next item was for the Celtics Way Roadway Revitalization Project, $187,077.01 paid to T. Riviere Equipment and Excavation. The downtown parking garage is getting quite well along. It was $811,298.50. $809,048.50 was paid to T. Riviere contractor, and $2,250 to Miller Stauffer for design. And last but not least, the Four Corners Memorial Park project was a total of $969,687.26, basically for construction of park materials for various contractors for various parts, including the skateboard part. So all total, we don't have a total. Do we have a total? Do you have a total on that one? Sorry, mine didn't print. All total is $2,019,915.10. Mine didn't print.
Hashtags.
That's quite a significant number not to print off.
Yeah.
It's too big for the box.
That's right.
Printer wouldn't have.
So that is the payables for July, August of 2018.
Thank you very much. Any comment?
Summer season, lots of money going out.
Or a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Lake and River District financial statements as well as the payables for the month of July 2018.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks.
Tony, you're going to handle the River District note?
Yes, I'll do that. So the next item is the River District 2018 note. Just some background for the board. On July 18th, at the board meeting, I discussed a proposal for a River District 2018 $7 million note request to banks seeking bank financing proposal, and to share that the Finance Committee has reviewed this initiative. The request to banks document involves sensing bank interest in funding a potential River District $7 million note. This proposed $7 million note is needed to fund the proposed Phase 1 Atlas Waterfront project cost to be incurred by an expanded River District, as well as provide a loan from the River District to the proposed new Atlas District to help pay for Phase 1 costs located within that district. Funding of the debt service for this proposed note will be generated by the tax increment valuation already existing in the River District. The proposed note will be retired on or before the expiration of the River District's term in 2027. Executive Director Burns has received guidance from the board to request bank proposals be submitted to the agency prior to the August board meeting, and to share the request with banking community via published legal notice, as well as direct contact with banks that were interested in the past, including Washington Trust Bank, Banner Bank, Mountain West Bank, and Umpqua Bank. So that was all completed. The proposals were asked to be submitted by Monday of this week, and I received one proposal from Washington Trust Bank, which I shared with you. Washington Trust Bank is willing to fund the entire $7 million note, term of 10 years to the end of the district with a fixed interest rate of 3.30, and there's no payoff penalty. There will be a loan fee of $7,000, legal fee cap of $3,500, and one of their conditions is Ignite to maintain a River District cash on hand balance in the amount of 10% of the outstanding note balance. And with these cash balances will be adjusted semi-annually. So it's a very similar mechanism that we have in place for the current Washington Trust Bank notes in the Lake District. So I think it's a very, very viable proposal and much appreciated from our partner, Washington Trust Bank. Any questions?
No. I move we approve the proposal for a $7 million loan, Series 2018 from Washington Trust Bank.
Second.
Moved and seconded. After that wonderful dissertation, is there any other comments?
Well, the only thing I might add to the motion, if it's acceptable, is that you direct myself and legal counsel Quaid to craft the necessary documentations for the note, so we can get that going.
I actually thought that was part of the additional fees of $3,500, but that would not be part of it. Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Yes, I'll accept that.
Thank you. So the motion's as amended?
Yes.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. That one, Commissioner Gordon, do you have any parking update?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, on the City Parking Commission, the date for our next meeting is September 4th. There's currently a subcommittee reviewing the rate structure for the various parking lots in the city, so we're expecting that report then. And I think later in September, that report goes to the City Council for consideration.
Good.
As far as the parking structure over on Coeur d'Alene Avenue, I think they're still looking at a end of September completion date. They're hoping that temporary concrete, or not concrete, the temporary cement shortage for about a week didn't hold anything up, and they can make it up. So that's still on track, and they're doing the brick veneer facade and all those things. It's moving along, starting to look pretty good.
Looks nice.
I don't know if Tony has any later updates than that.
Just a follow-up, the cement concrete issue has been resolved. They completed pour 7, their final pour yesterday. Yeah. So we're done pouring decks, and now they're just going to do some, a few other cement concrete work, and then finish up with the brick and the facade work. Start bringing the elevator materials in, bringing the stairwells, stairs, just all the finishing internal touches. So hopefully they'll be starting to shrink that project site a little bit as the months go on, or the month and a half goes on, but they are still looking at this time to be done by the end of August, or September.
Excellent. Good report. Thank you. Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first topic I'd like to chat with is if I could ask Mr. Phil Boyd to join the board meeting and update the board on the Atlas Waterfront project. Thank you, Mr. Boyd, for attending this meeting this afternoon.
Have a seat at the table for you.
Okay. So thank you, Chairman Hoskins, board members, for having me here. I'm giving just a little update, which we've been doing for the last 3 months. The objective, obviously, is to keep the board current on the changes that are occurring as we move through the URD process. So I've just been keeping a kind of a running total so you can see the things we've talked about in the past, because I know you all visit this once a month or occasionally a couple times during the month if Tony shoots out an update email and you have busy lives. So I'm trying to keep a little bit of institutional memory on the screen. Where we're at today, I'm going to talk about the URD boundary updates and the project schedule. This is the screen you guys have seen a number of times of the proposed facility, the development layout, and the phases for the construction that are shown on there. You'll notice phase 5 is gone, and that was intentional because, and Danielle might have to supplement this discussion, but the short story is that phase is in an existing, it's in the existing Lake District and River District. And so as we have been working through refinement of the district boundaries with Tony and Danielle, one of the observations Danielle made was the current financial model shouldn't contain projects, revenue, or expenses that are associated with an existing district. So we've been unwinding some of the math and whatnot. So if you want more of an explanation than that, you'll have to ask Danielle. I
Just
just did
didn't
what
want to
the,
double count, right? Because it's, the funds for that project are already in the existing Lake District projections that Tony has, so we don't want to put them in this new projection for the Atlas project as well.
it starts to make sense. It makes it a very clean, it's all new, so to speak. It's just, we're just talking about expansion, the expanded districts or the created districts. So again, to try to keep both the board and the public on track with where we've been, this is the original boundary layout that we had conceived. And the reason it was conceived this way was because of the financing in each of the available districts, the public space in the Lake District, how much funding was available there. It went through one revision right there where the blue circle is. And before, again, that was an observation Danielle made by simply moving the line from there to there. We didn't create any additional expense because there's no infrastructure associated with that, but we did capture additional properties. As we continue to work through the boundaries, we've made a couple of more changes. One of them, the most significant was moving the boundary that was on the north side of the future road to the south side of the future road. So it took that road expense out of the Lake District. The reason that occurred was because we were trying to not load up the Lake District because of the limited funding that's available there. And so as Tony looked through and we were trying to balance the budget, so to speak, that's why that boundary moved to the south side of the road. So now that road cost, that infrastructure cost, moves from the Lake District into the future Atlas District, which has a longer life. We also made some adjustments over here. You can see that this line here, to some extent, was an artificial line. It was a line we put in as a plat boundary, a future plat boundary. As we started working through the technical details of platting this property, because remember, we have to short plat this property to create the URD boundaries to be in compliance with the statute. And I know this is getting a little technical, so I'll speed through it. You guys have been here a while. But that's why that line moved from there, whoops, to here. So the River District, this is still River District, this is still River District, but those are the two areas that have changed. And you can see it went from in here to that area. Any questions on that, or, okay. So those are the tweaks that we've made to the River District boundary. One important detail that Tony and Danielle and I have been spending some time talking about is because of the way that the rules govern changing district boundaries, this boundary that you see along here is along a future road right-of-way line. So that boundary really needs to be defined by the road design, because typically what you do is you design the road and then you dedicate the right-of-way for that road. Well, we're not dedicating any right-of-way, but we are creating a boundary that won't likely ever be moved. And that's typically driven by road design. So you can see the out-of-sequence nature of this. So we've been spending a fair amount of time doing preliminary road design along that segment, particularly that curve, to make sure the road, the boundary line is in the correct location. So when we get ready to dedicate that right-of-way, it's in the correct location, and because we can't move the boundary. I hope I'm not overstating that, Tony, but I think I've got my education in district boundaries nailed down now. So those are some updates that we have there.
Would you entertain a question?
Hmm?
I just have a quick question. And I'm sure Danielle's already looked into this, but it looks pretty narrow on that Lake District expansion. Are we still good on how narrow it is?
You just can't connect to, when you do an expansion, you can't connect the new area to the old area with the shoestring, but this isn't a connection. It's the way the expansion flows.
And that is I always zoom right in on the board's or the city's property, but remember to the west is the Lance Douglas property, which would be in, that green continues on to the west. So there's that whole parcel over there.
Phil, just where is the Centennial Trail as it turns to go north there?
Right up in here, it continues on like this, and continues up through
So
that
the,
here.
so the jogging to the east is the other side of the east side of the trail.
Yeah, the trail is kind of in the middle of what was the UP right-of-way. So see the boundary line there and the boundary line there. If you were to put the trail right down the middle of it, that's about where it would be.
Okay.
Just a quick note on that. That's one of the things that's been in the back of my mind as well. This is a short plat, and it's creating 4 parcels. The reason we're doing 4 parcels in a short plat is that it's an administrative process through the city of Coeur d'Alene. It's much shorter, and we have a little bit of a time crunch. As we move forward, there may be some direction by council or the board, gee, we want to create a separate tract for that public space. Remember, this is future public space in here as well, but that's a consideration that we'll discuss with Hillary and other folks in her shop. I won't belabor this. This is a schedule we're keeping and adding to. As you can see, it moves out to 2020 as we start to refine things that in our process, we're continuing to update the schedule. Where we're at, the board, the city, is right here. And so a more detailed breakdown of that schedule is this. You can see how many moving parts are on this. And so as I was, there's a whole other part to this that you can't see on the screen that has the players associated with who's leading each segment, who's making presentations at council. It involves a lot of Hillary's time, my time, Tony's time, Danielle's time. And all this was rattling around in my head, and I'm thinking, we've got to get this organized to make sure we know when we're hitting deadlines and when we have to make publications. Hillary added a great column out to the right that has a bunch of other information in it. So you can see that there's, we've got a navigable water zone annexation, the P&Z hearing for annexations, when we have to submit the URD. The one that interestingly is not on here is the next board meeting, 9/19. I do have the submittal, Tony. You see here, 9/12, I'm making my submittal. Tony and I had talked about that, and we wanted to back that up so the board could get that packet of information early, so you can be looking at it and contemplating questions before the board meeting. And then we just kind of continue on. So for the next 4 months, this kind of lays out our tasks and keeps us all, at least it keeps me organized. Hopefully it keeps other folks organized. Any questions on that?
Looks good.
Okay. And then just finally, the budget. As you guys know, budgets are moving, living, breathing things, except we're kind of set on the bottom line, so to speak. As we were working through the financial models, one of the things appeared to me, or it occurred to me, that the way that Heartland had been allocating site development cost was unfairly, I don't know if that's the right word, inaccurately burdening the Lake District. And so then and you can see the big numbers here for site improvements and site grading. And if you've been down to the site, you kind of just think about the site and you walk there, if you're walking along the shoreline or the water's edge, it doesn't need a lot of work to it, it needs some work. But then you think about the interior of it, well, it needs a lot of work. Well, that's where all the money is. In their model, they are ratioing those expenses by acreage, which that's why it was, I say, unfairly burdening the Lake District. So as we were digging through that, we adjusted that, and you can see how those numbers have decreased substantially. We're still down here at the same budget, but what it did is by more accurately allocating costs from up here, you can see that the park budget, what we could spend, went up. And just for kind of completeness, we just don't willy-nilly add things to a budget. Just, hey, we have $400,000, let's stick it in there. One of the amenities that was not in the clean and green was a restroom. And again, that may not be ultimately what finally lands there, but we put the restroom back in. It was in our big estimate. And then shoreline stabilization, as you guys know, that budget came out hoping for outside sources. Those sources are not likely going to be available in this construction season. And when I say construction season, the winter construction season during low water. If we're fortunate enough to get through all the processes we need to and actually can put a project out to bid, to build access down to the water. That would be a really positive thing. And so working through the budget with Tony, he suggested we put it back into there, but roll it out to the board here to make sure you all are kind of comfortable with the direction we're heading with the budget.
Phil, originally that was a larger number. Is that a possibility that we could get funding in future years?
Yeah, that's what we did, Commissioner Arman, is we took a portion of the entire 1.4 million and essentially identified the critical areas that need stabilization. And if you've been through the shoreline there, you kind of know there's areas that are just crying out, please come stabilize me. And those are the areas that we would use structured stabilization, steps or rocks, because that gives the opportunity for the public to get to the water, but we're not going in and taking away vegetation that's existing and healthy. It needs some love and care and weed control and things like that. But that's why that number is lower. It's kind of a targeted area. And we were budget limited. You know, we're still hitting that 3.7 million down there. But it gives us opportunity to go in and do some things. Primarily, as you guys may know, there's a lot of erosion caused by the public going over the bank. And so we would suggest that going in there and giving them accesses that are structured, that don't create erosion, and then fence off other areas to keep them out. So those are the changes in the budget there. Yeah. So those are kind of the quick highlights of the project changes and updates, and glad to answer any questions you may have. It's going to be busy for the board and the city council and Hillary and I and other folks involved with this, Tony, as we move through this, because there's lots of different parts and pieces that have to happen there at very specific timeframes to hit that 12-4 council consideration of forming the URDs.
So in summary, what the process will be is that at the September board meeting, we'll do a lot of work on plan review. You'll see the draft plans prior to that for the amended Lake District, the amended River District, and the new Atlas District. You're going to see Phil and his team's final report with the economic feasibility study all laid out, and it's all going to be kind of put together for your review and approval to send on through the city's process.
Looking for approval on that meeting?
Yeah,
then?
so we'll be kind of inundating you with a lot of information regarding the Atlas project and the district expansions at the September board meeting. In order to make that December 4th date, that's our sequencing.
As Tony has mentioned, we don't want to be presumptuous when stuff gets presented to the board. You all might say, gosh, we'd like more time to think about this, or we've got these questions that came up. That 12-4 deadline, the reason we're pushing so hard now is to get it to 12-4, so there's a little bit of buffer in there before the end of the year if there needed to be another council meeting, I think is that month. Yeah. So I guess at least, I think we're all prepared. The team is prepared to, if the board has questions at that September meeting, then we need to go back.
Your timeline is excellent. It really is. It really helps a great deal.
Thank you.
It keeps things moving.
Yeah, me too.
Can I get a copy?
Yes. Yeah. I'll put the board meeting date in there, though, so you can put it in your calendar. Not that you would miss a board meeting.
No.
Yeah, no, that's great. Just send that to Tony.
Good.
Nice.
Very good. Thanks,
Thank
Phil.
you.
Thank you. And Hillary, thank you guys for getting lots of moving pieces.
So the next item I have, Mr. Chairman, is just the annual ICRIMP insurance policy, terrorism insurance coverage conversation. I'll make this brief. Over the past years, you've declined the additional terrorism insurance that's been proposed by ICRIMP. It's not needed. They have $50 million in terrorism insurance. If we went with the extra, it would cost us $5,000 a year, and in years past, you've always declined this, but I have to officially bring this forward for your review. And once again, our insurance agent recommends that we decline.
I move we decline.
I second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Passes.
Funny quick question, though. What does the 5,000 buy additional coverage?
I'd have to look. I don't have the amount.
Not important. I'm just curious. Yeah.
The next item, Mr. Chairman, is the North Park Drive lots. As I've shared with you, on August 13th, we received a purchase offer for Lot 6 in the North Park.
Tony, if we're going to take action on this item, we need to make a motion to amend the agenda under 74-204-4B. We did post that amended agenda, but to make that amended agenda effective. So I didn't we didn't talk before about whether or not we do have an action item. But if we do, we would need a
On the North
motion.
Park
So
Drive?
what, the sequence is that we posted the agenda 48 hours in advance, like we're supposed to. Yesterday, we received an offer on one of the lots. So we subsequently posted another agenda with the action item denoted thereon. But to make that agenda effective, we need a motion to effectuate the agenda prior to taking action. And it's under Idaho Code 74-204 for subparagraph 4, subparagraph B.
So, motion to affect amended agenda?
Right.
Amend the agenda
So,
under,
right, make the amended agenda effective. The amended agenda, which was posted
Right, right.
yesterday.
so we have to make it effective.
Yes.
So I move that we make the amended agenda effective under Idaho Code 74-204-4-B.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Okay, let me catch up here.
Any
So,
discussion on that? No, that's true.
Lots of numbers.
74-204.
Idaho Code, what was the code again?
74-204, paren 4, paren small b.
You must get good numbers in law school.
Well, I've got it up right in front of me because I knew this was probably coming.
So, and that was motion by?
Harmon.
Okay, thank
So
you.
Danielle, this is only because there could potentially be, not that we're going to, but potentially be an action item on the North Park Drive.
Right,
Okay.
and under the new code, we have to denote action items on the agenda. Before we got that offer, we didn't think this would be an action item. Upon receiving the offer, we then amended the agenda, reposted it as we were supposed to, but to effectuate that, you have to make this motion.
Thank you.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank
Okay. So, on August 13th, we received a purchase offer for Lot 6 in the North Park Drive subdivision. The asking price for the Lot 6 is, if by the board, is $279,000. The appraised value was $220,000, and the purchase offer for Lot 6 was $200,000. I thought this was kind of a fairly low bid for that, so I kind of reached out to some board members and chatted with them, and decided to make a counter offer to the buyers at $249,000 based on board approval, which we are here to discuss today. So that would be the issue at hand. So the counteroffer's been made, but it's not viable until the board agrees to it. And so if you make a motion to so agree to that counteroffer, then it is effective, and we'll see if the buyers respond.
I make a motion to reject the initial offer and make a counteroffer of 245 or 249? 249.
Was it 249.9?
It was 249.
Shows 249 even there.
I think.
Okay.
Okay, and did you have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Will we accept a counter from them?
Well, this is new country for us, so we could, with the conversation that we had, and I'm not sure if Commissioner Jordan wants to weigh in on this, but he had some very good rationale about how the $249,000 was set, so.
Well, the rationale, I had just got a quick discussion with Mayor Widmeyer, but I see two things. One is, I think we have a sale, I think, for 241, is sold already. I think that appraised value, that was done last winter, early spring, so I think that's low right now. I think two things. One is, I feel when you have a project like this and you're selling lots, I feel a moral obligation not to undercut the people that already bought the lots in good faith. And I also feel that we don't want to undercut ourselves, because hypothetically, if we just said, well, let's just take this $200,000 offer and sell it, we're going to have a comp going in the MLS for $200,000, and that's going to come back to haunt us trying to sell the other lots.
Yeah.
So that's the reasoning on it, but I think that's too low. We just, talked and came up with the idea of 249. In a lot of cases, I've seen cases where when you've got a lowball offer like this that's way off, the seller might come off $5,000 and say, there's probably some more negotiation room, but we're so far off right now, you know, if we get a little bit closer, we probably could negotiate some more. It was decided, just go ahead and make our best counter, 249,000, that's fair, and then see if they want to take it or not.
That's reasonable.
And to answer another part of the equation was is that, you know, we, with this transaction, we would have a 3% sales commission.
Right.
So we are trying to net in that 240,
Got
241
it.
range, so.
Nice.
And it isn't a done deal, even at the 249, there's some question about that part that's carved out to try and preserve that tree. They had some concerns about that, and we'll have to address that, but it's one thing at a time. It's kind of like eating an elephant one bite at a time, so we'll
Thank
just try to work this through and see how interested they are in buying this property. There's a lot more encumbrances against these lots than there would be on some lots a private developer was doing. That's a different story because it's a, you know, a public project.
But if they were to counter back, we would have to come back to the board at a special meeting to seek your approval to the transaction, so nothing will happen without you.
Right. Could I ask a quick question while you're on that subject? If we did get a counter, what's the parameters? Does Tony have the parameters to, if we decide to reject a counter to the counter? Can we discuss it on email, or do we have to hold a special?
Can't discuss it on email.
Okay. We have to
We
hold a
absolutely
special call.
can't. We'd have to have a special call meeting, I think, to reject the agreement.
Okay.
So currently, our counteroffer is valid till 3 o'clock on Friday. So if they do not respond, then everything just kind of goes away. If they respond and accept it, then we'll proceed with the closing process and so forth. If they counter, then we'll enter that new area. If we think it's a viable counter, then we'll bring it back to the board.
Brad's got a good point. They're so far apart that they may not come back.
So let's talk a little bit about this lot, because this is probably gonna come up again. It's got a notch in it because of that tree.
In the building envelope?
Yes.
Yep.
Is that taking away a value? I'm sure it is.
Yeah, definitely taking it away.
So how tied are we to this tree?
I'm not tied at all.
Well, I've contacted our friends at the city in the planning department, and we're going to chat about what our opportunities and recourse might be to look at that. It's in the plat. We'd have to probably amend the plat to not only affect Lot 6, but there's also a carve-out in Lot 9 for another tree that the city would like to save. So
Well, I just see it as one of the contingencies in this offer, so it will probably come up again.
Oh, yes.
And it will probably come up in the other lot too. So I think we need to make a decision that if we're gonna leave the trees there and dictate that, then we're gonna lose value.
And
Some
I'm not.
people might see trees as more value.
But you're losing building space.
Yeah, as I said earlier, there's encumbrances on these lots a private developer wouldn't have to go with. And it's just how it is. I kind of understood this, but it's really being hit home on these lots because you've got all these different city departments like urban forestry and parks that all have a part in it and planning. And so a private developer would be doing these for maximum value. He'd be saving trees for buffer. He'd be doing fencing for buffer, and he wouldn't be preserving a tree right in the middle of the building envelope. So, and I'm all for preserving trees. Whenever I do something, I try to save every tree I can because they have desirability. But then there's that balance, whereas that tree taking away desirability because it's going to make it that much harder to build a house. So that's a subjective thing we have to deal with. But obviously, it's a concern to these people. So it's probably something we should look at, whether this offer goes or we're trying to be ready for the next offer.
Okay. Further comment? Does everybody remember the motion, the seconded motion?
Yep.
Make a counteroffer for 249? Yep. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks. Next.
Finally, Mr. Chairman, just some initiative updates. T-Sway Road revitalization, should be done paving this week. Irrigation landscape is scheduled to be completed by the end of the month, so we should be wrapping this project up at the end of August, is what I'm being told. On the railroad right-of-way surplus property sale, as I shared with you, we closed on the property on August 10th, receiving net proceeds of $319,995.76. So we have that one behind, and those funds have been deposited. Ignited Riverstone update, that project, the due diligence efforts with, continue with Welch Comer Engineers to determine the viability of that project, that proposed land exchange with the city. We're kind of waiting, the initiative is waiting the finality of the traffic study to kind of see how that piece of the world plays into transportation issues down in the Riverstone Belle Reve area. North Idaho College Education Nice Facility Initiative is underway. The only hiccup has been a little extra time needed by the contractors for unanticipated soil removal. We do have an official agreement with NIC for a funding agreement. Our funding agreement participation amount has been reduced from $2.5 million down to $2,344,850 due to the lower bid than what the engineers estimated. So we have a little bit of savings there. Nothing new to report on the North Park Drive lot sales other than what we've discussed. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We'll have to decide what we're going to do about the lot we didn't get a bid on.
Lakeside 301? That's the one I'm curious.
that'd
Yeah,
be
what's
a
the process on
future
that?
topic.
Well, I was going to maybe put that on the agenda for Friday. Since we're going to be talking about this, we can talk about next steps.
Yeah, okay. Now it's time for board commissioner comments. Any board member have some comments?
CDA 2030 is having their 5th annual celebration tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah. It's at
5:30.
5:30
5:30.
at Riverstone.
Right by the pond.
Okay. Now it's time for public comment. Any public comment? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks. Me too.
I'm gonna shave.
And that's a wrap.
You know, at the time we did this counter,